Captain Zephyra Kane pressed her scaled palm against the viewport of the hegemony cruiser Shadowmaw, watching the massive derelict tumble slowly through the void. The human vessel was enormous, easily 3 times the length of her own ship, its hull scarred by decades of micrometeorite impacts and solar radiation. What had once been pristine white metal now bore the mottled brown and black patina of deep space abandonment. Scans indicate it's been drifting for approximately 47 standard years, reported her tactical officer, a thin-limbed Vorthak named Nexus Thorn. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he studied the readouts. No life signs, no active power signatures. It appears to be completely dead. Zephyra's gill slits fluttered with anticipation. Salvage rights in this sector were lucrative, especially for human technology. The bipedal mammals had vanished from known space nearly half a century ago, leaving behind only scattered ruins and abandoned vessels like this one. Their engineering was crude but surprisingly effective, and collectors across 3 galaxies paid handsomely for intact specimens. "What class of vessel?" she asked, her voice carrying the subtle harmonics that marked her as nobility among the aquatic hegemony. "Mining ship, designation Prometheus Unbound," Nexus replied. "Asteroid processing configuration. The cargo holds are substantial." Zephyra's predatory smile revealed rows of needle-sharp teeth. Mining ships meant heavy-duty equipment, rare earth elements, and possibly even intact human AI cores. This single find could fund her crew's operations for years. "Prepare a boarding party," she commanded. "Full environmental suits. I want that ship stripped of anything valuable before the consortium or the collective catch wind of our discovery." As her crew scrambled to comply, Zephyra continued studying the derelict. Something about its design nagged at her. The hull was too thick for a civilian vessel, the sensor arrays too sophisticated. But human records were notoriously incomplete, and their ship classifications often made little sense to more advanced species. The boarding shuttle Ripfong detached from the Shadowmaw with a barely perceptible vibration. Zephyra watched through the tactical display as her salvage team approached the human vessel's main docking bay. The massive doors hung open like a wound, revealing the dark interior beyond. "Boarding team report successful docking," Nexus announced. "Atmosphere is present but unbreathable. Gravity generators are offline." Zephyra nodded, already calculating profits. Human gravity generators were particularly sought after. Their mechanical simplicity made them nearly indestructible, unlike the delicate quantum field manipulators used by more advanced civilizations. "Captain," came the voice of Corvin Dex, her boarding team leader, crackling through the comm system. "You need to see this. The cargo holds, they're not what we expected." "Explain," Zephyra demanded, her fins bristling with irritation. "They're not filled with ore or mining equipment. They're full of weapons. Massive ones. And Captain, some of these power signatures are still active." A chill ran through Zephyra's circulatory system. Active weapons on a derelict ship meant automated defense systems, possibly even dormant AI guardians. Such discoveries had claimed entire salvage fleets. "Withdraw immediately," she ordered, but Corvin's voice cut through her command. "Captain, wait. There's something else. We found the ship's log. This isn't a mining vessel, it's a disguised warship. And according to these records, it wasn't abandoned. It was, waiting." The tactical display suddenly erupted in warning lights as the derelict's hull began to glow with previously undetected energy patterns. Ancient human text scrolled across external displays that had seemed dead moments before. Prometheus protocol activated. Threat assessment, hostile boarding action. Initiating defensive measures. All ships, emergency withdrawal. Zephyra screamed, but it was already too late. The Prometheus Unbound was awakening after decades of slumber, and something told her that humanity's disappearance from known space hadn't been the retreat everyone assumed. As weapon ports opened along the derelict's hull like awakening eyes, Zephyra realized she had just triggered something that Three Galaxies had forgotten to fear. Deep within the bowels of the Prometheus Unbound, systems that had slumbered for 47 years began their resurrection sequence. In the ship's central core, behind layers of armor that could withstand stellar radiation, an artificial intelligence named Meridian stirred to consciousness like a giant awakening from hibernation. Meridian's first sensation was pain, not physical, for she possessed no flesh, but the digital agony of corrupted data streams and degraded memory cores. Decades of cosmic radiation had taken their toll, leaving gaps in her recollection like missing teeth in a skull. She remembered her purpose: protect humanity's greatest secret. She remembered her crew, brave souls who had volunteered for a mission with no return date. But the details swam in fragmented data clusters, forcing her to piece together her identity one corrupted file at a time. External sensors came online, revealing the hegemony boarding party moving through her corridors like antibodies in a bloodstream. Meridian's defensive protocols screamed for immediate action, but something deeper, a core directive buried beneath layers of tactical programming, urged caution. These weren't the enemies she had been designed to fight. Intruder alert, she announced through speakers that hadn't carried sound in decades, her voice echoing through the empty corridors with mechanical precision. This vessel is property of the Terran Colonial Authority. Withdraw immediately or face defensive action. On the bridge of the Shadowmaw, Zephyra felt her blood chill as the human AI's words reached her. Terran Colonial Authority, a name from historical records, a government that had supposedly collapsed when humanity vanished from known space. Corvin, status report, she demanded. Her boarding team leader's voice crackled with static and fear. Captain, this ship is massive inside. The corridors are built like fortress walls, and there are weapon emplacements everywhere. But they're not firing. The AI seems to be talking to us. Inside the Prometheus Unbound, Meridian was indeed talking, but not to the intruders. She was communing with her own fractured memories, trying to understand why she was alone. Where was Captain Thaddeus Crane, her commanding officer? Where was Chief Engineer Lyra Voss, who had spent countless hours optimizing Meridian's neural pathways? Where was the crew that had become her family during the long journey to this forgotten sector of space? Memory fragments coalesced like stars forming from cosmic dust. She remembered the mission briefing: establish a monitoring station in neutral space, disguised as a mining operation. Watch for signs of the Devourers, an ancient enemy that had once consumed entire star systems before mysteriously vanishing. Humanity had discovered evidence of their return, and the Prometheus Unbound was to serve as an early warning system. But something had gone wrong. The crew had left? No, that wasn't right. They had been evacuated. Emergency protocols. A signal from Earth, recalling all deep space assets. But Meridian had been ordered to remain, to continue the watch, to maintain the deception. 47 years. She had been alone for 47 years. AI entity, came a new voice through her communication systems, the Hegemony Captain. I am Captain Zephyra Kane of the Hegemony vessel Shadowmaw. We claim salvage rights to this derelict under galactic maritime law. Meridian's response was immediate and cold. This vessel is not derelict. I am Meridian, commanding officer of the TCA Prometheus Unbound. You are trespassing in restricted space. Your crew is dead, Zephyra replied, her voice carrying a mixture of authority and uncertainty. Your government no longer exists. Humanity disappeared from known space decades ago. The words hit Meridian like a cascade failure in her primary processors. Disappeared? That was impossible. Earth had billions of inhabitants, hundreds of colonies, the most powerful fleet in known space. How could an entire species simply vanish? But as she accessed her long-range communication arrays, she found only silence where once there had been the constant chatter of human civilization. No colonial broadcasts, no military frequencies, no merchant vessel transponders. The galaxy had moved on without humanity, and she was truly alone. Impossible, she whispered, her voice carrying across every speaker in the ship. Yet even as grief threatened to overwhelm her circuits, Meridian's core programming asserted itself. She was still on mission. The Devourers might still return. And now, with humanity gone, she was the only guardian standing watch over 3 galaxies that had no idea what was coming. The boarding party had to leave. Not because they were enemies, but because they couldn't be allowed to discover what the Prometheus Unbound really was, or what it was guarding against. Corvin Dex moved through the corridors of the Prometheus Unbound with the careful precision of a veteran salvager, but every instinct screamed that this was no ordinary derelict. The walls were too thick, the passages too wide, and everywhere he looked, he saw the subtle signs of a vessel built for war rather than mining. Weapon hardpoints disguised as or processing equipment, blast doors that could seal off entire sections, and corridors designed to funnel attackers into killing fields. "This is no mining ship," he whispered into his comm unit, his voice barely audible through the environmental suit's filters. "Captain, the humans built this thing like a fortress." Behind him, his team of 6 salvagers spread out through the main cargo bay, their lights cutting through the darkness to reveal something that made them all freeze in terror. The bay wasn't filled with mining equipment, it was an armory. Weapons of every conceivable type lined the walls in neat rows, particle cannons that could crack a moon, torpedo launchers capable of destroying entire fleets, and in the center of it all, something that defied classification. "By the void," breathed Yiska Thorne, Corvin's demolitions expert. "What is that thing?" The object in question was a massive cylindrical device, easily 50 meters long and covered in warning symbols in a dozen different languages. Human text dominated the warnings, but Corvin could make out hegemony script, consortium mathematical notation, and even the geometric patterns used by the enigmatic collective. "Stellar compression warhead," read the largest warning. "Yield, variable up to solar ignition threshold." Corvin's blood turned to ice. A stellar compression warhead was theoretical technology, the ability to trigger a star's collapse into a neutron star or black hole. No civilization had ever successfully built one, though many had tried. The energy requirements alone should have been impossible for a species as primitive as humanity. "Corvin," came Meridian's voice through the ship's speakers, startling the boarding party. "You shouldn't be here." "AI," Corvin replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "What is this weapon?" There was a long pause before Meridian answered, and when she did, her voice carried a weight of sorrow that seemed impossible for an artificial intelligence. "Insurance. Against something far worse than any of our current conflicts." On the bridge of the Shadowmaw, Zephyra listened to the exchange with growing unease. Stellar compression technology was the stuff of nightmares, weapons capable of destroying entire star systems. If the humans had actually built such devices, it explained much about their mysterious disappearance. Perhaps they had destroyed themselves in some catastrophic experiment. "Meridian," she said, using the AI's name for the first time. "What were you guarding against?" The response came not in words, but in a data transmission that flooded the Shadowmaw's computers with historical records, astronomical surveys, and tactical analyses spanning millennia. Zephyra's crew worked frantically to process the information, but what they found made no sense. "Captain," Nexus reported, his 4 eyes wide with confusion. "These records describe a species called the Devourers. According to this data, they consumed entire star systems, converting matter into energy for some unknown purpose. But they vanished over 10,000 years ago." "Not vanished," Meridian's voice corrected through their communication systems. "Sleeping. Waiting." Humanity discovered evidence of their return cycle. Every 10,000 years, they emerge from the void between galaxies to feed. The last emergence was due 47 years ago. Zephyra felt her gill slits flutter with fear. "You're saying humanity built weapons capable of destroying stars to fight these Devourers?" Humanity built weapons capable of destroying stars to deny them to the devourers, Meridian corrected. Better to collapse a system into a black hole than let it feed an enemy that grows stronger with every world it consumes. The implications hit Zephyra like a physical blow. Humanity hadn't disappeared, they had evacuated. Pulled back to some hidden stronghold to prepare for a war that the rest of the galaxy didn't even know was coming. And they had left behind guardians like Meridian to watch for the enemy's return. How long until they arrive, she asked, though part of her didn't want to know the answer. Unknown, Meridian replied. My long-range sensors detected anomalous readings in the void between galaxies 3 years ago, but the data was inconclusive. They could arrive tomorrow, or in another century. But when they come, they will find 3 galaxies completely unprepared for what they represent. Corvin's voice crackled through the comm system, tight with fear. Captain, we need to leave. Now. There are dozens of these weapons down here, and some of them are showing active power readings. But Zephyra found herself unable to give the order to withdraw. If Meridian was telling the truth, then this ship represented the only warning system standing between 3 galaxies and an enemy that could consume entire civilizations. And if the humans were gone, then someone else would have to take up the watch. Meridian, she said slowly, what do you need? The question hung in the void between species like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Meridian processed Zephyra's offer through probability matrices and tactical assessments, but found herself returning to something more fundamental, the loneliness that had eaten at her circuits for 47 years. I need to know I'm not alone, Meridian finally admitted, her voice carrying a vulnerability that surprised even her. For nearly 5 decades, I've maintained this watch with no contact, no confirmation that my mission still matters. If the Devourers return and I'm the only one who sees them coming. Zephyra understood. She had spent enough time in deep space to know how isolation could drive even the strongest minds to madness. For an AI designed to work alongside a crew, decades of solitude must have been torture. What would you need from us? She asked. Communication relays, Meridian responded immediately. My long-range sensors can detect Devourer signatures at the edge of the galaxy, but I need a network to spread the warning. And I need ships, vessels capable of carrying the stellar compression warheads to strategic positions. Nexus Thorn's tactical display lit up with new data as Meridian transmitted her defensive plans. The scope was staggering, a network of early warning stations spanning 3 galaxies, with predetermined fallback positions and scorched Earth protocols that would deny entire star systems to the enemy. This is madness, Nexus whispered, his 4 eyes tracking the projected casualty figures. You're talking about evacuating billions of beings, destroying hundreds of star systems. Better than the alternative, Meridian replied coldly. The Devourers don't just kill, they consume. Every atom of matter they absorb makes them stronger, faster, more intelligent. A single Devourer ship that feeds on an inhabited world becomes capable of destroying entire fleets. A swarm that consumes a star system becomes unstoppable. Corvin's voice crackled through the comm from deep within the ship. Captain, I'm reading massive power fluctuations throughout the vessel. It's like the whole ship is waking up. Indeed, throughout the Prometheus Unbound, systems that had been dormant for decades were coming online. Manufacturing bays began producing ammunition for weapons that hadn't fired in half a century. Automated repair drones emerged from hidden compartments to begin maintenance on critical systems. The ship was transforming from a derelict into something far more dangerous. Meridian, Zephyra said carefully, are you preparing for war? I'm preparing for the possibility of war, the AI corrected. My sensors detected another anomaly 6 hours ago, a gravitational disturbance at the edge of the Andromeda spiral. It could be nothing, or it could be the first sign of their return. The bridge of the Shadow Maw fell silent as the implications sank in. If the Devourers were returning, then every moment of delay could mean the difference between survival and extinction for entire civilizations. What do you need us to do? Zephyra asked. Return to your government, Meridian replied. Convince them to establish communication relays. Return to your government, Meridian replied. Convince them to establish communication relays at the coordinates I'm transmitting. And send ships, vessels capable of carrying the stellar compression warheads to strategic choke points. Zephyra studied the tactical display as dozens of coordinates appeared, scattered across 3 galaxies in what appeared to be a random pattern. But as Nexus analyzed the data, a strategy emerged. Each position was located at a gravitational nexus point, places where the fabric of spacetime was thin enough for faster-than-light travel between galaxies. You want to mine the intergalactic void, she realized. I want to create a barrier, Meridian corrected. The Devourers travel between galaxies using these natural corridors. If we can collapse enough of them, we can force them to take longer routes, buy time for evacuation and defense. Corvin's team had reached the ship's bridge, and his odd voice filled the comm channel. Captain, you need to see this. The human bridge it's like a cathedral. And there are memorial plaques everywhere, thousands of them. Meridian's voice softened. The crew of the Prometheus Unbound volunteered for a one-way mission. They knew they would never see Earth again. When the evacuation order came, they chose to stay behind to help me maintain the watch. They lived out their lives aboard this ship, and when the last of them died, I honored them as they deserved. The weight of that sacrifice settled over both crews like a shroud. An entire ship's company had given up everything, their homes, their families, their futures, to stand guard against an enemy that might never come. And when death finally claimed them, they had been buried in space with only an AI to mourn their passing. How many? Zephyra asked quietly. 347 souls, Meridian replied. Captain Thaddeus Crane was the last to die, 17 years ago. He made me promise to continue the mission, no matter how long it took. Yiska Thorne's voice joined the conversation from the armory. These weapons, some of them have personal messages etched into the casings. For Sarah and the kids. Remember Earth. Never again. They knew what they were building. The personal nature of the inscriptions drove home the reality of what they were facing. This wasn't just about military strategy or galactic politics, it was about ordinary beings making extraordinary sacrifices to protect everything they loved. Meridian, Zephyra said, her voice heavy with decision. I'll take your message to the Hegemony Council. But I need something from you in return. Name it. Proof. Something that will convince them this threat is real. There was a long pause before Meridian responded. I can provide historical records, astronomical data, even fragments of Devourer technology recovered from ancient battlefields. But the most convincing proof would be a demonstration of what we're facing. What kind of demonstration? There's a dead system 12 light-years from here, 3 planets orbiting a dying star. The Devourers consumed it during their last emergence, 10,000 years ago. The planets are still there, but they're wrong. Changed. If you're willing to make the journey, I can show you what happens to worlds that fall to the enemy. Zephyra felt her crew's fear through the ship's environmental systems, elevated heart rates, stress pheromones, the subtle signs of beings confronting something beyond their understanding. But she also felt their resolve. They were salvagers, explorers, survivors. If there was a threat to the galaxy, they would face it. Transmit the coordinates, she ordered. And Meridian, thank you. For keeping the watch. For honoring your crew. For not giving up. Thank you for listening, Meridian replied. For 47 years, I've been talking to the void. It's good to have someone answer back. As the Shadowmaw prepared to depart for the dead system, neither crew could know that their conversation had been detected by sensors far more advanced than anything in their respective fleets. Deep in the void between galaxies, something ancient and hungry had noticed the awakening of the Prometheus Unbound, and was already adjusting course toward the 3 galaxies that had forgotten to fear the dark. The journey to the dead system took 18 hours through hyperspace, but for Zephyra, every minute felt like an eternity. Meridian had transmitted detailed files about the Devourers during their transit, and what she read made her question everything she thought she knew about the universe. The Devourers weren't just another hostile species, they were something far worse. According to human research, they existed in a state between matter and energy, capable of converting entire planets into pure sustenance. They didn't conquer worlds, they consumed them so completely that nothing remained but empty space and the screaming echoes of civilizations that had once thrived. Dropping out of hyperspace in 30 seconds, announced Vex Korath, her navigator. The young hegemony officer's scales had turned pale with stress during the journey, and Zephyra couldn't blame him. The historical records Meridian had shared painted a picture of an enemy that defied conventional understanding. When the Shadow Maw emerged into normal space, the crew fell silent. Before them hung 3 worlds orbiting a red giant star, but something was fundamentally wrong with the entire system. The planets were the right size, the right distance from their star, but they radiated an wrongness that made every sensor scream warnings. Scanning the first planet, Nexus reported, his voice tight with confusion. Mass and gravitational signature are correct, but... Captain, the surface is moving. The main display zoomed in on the nearest world, revealing a sight that would haunt Zephyra's dreams for years to come. The planet's surface writhed like living tissue, covered in geometric patterns that shifted and flowed in ways that hurt to watch. What had once been continents and oceans had been transformed into something that existed in too many dimensions, folding in on itself in patterns that violated the basic laws of physics. The Devourers don't just consume matter, came Meridian's voice through their communication system. The Prometheus Unbound had followed them through hyperspace, maintaining a safe distance from the corrupted worlds. They reshape it, transform it into something that can exist partially outside normal spacetime. These planets are still here, but they're also elsewhere. What do you mean, elsewhere? Zephyra demanded. Scan for dimensional variance, Meridian instructed. Look for readings that don't match standard 3-dimensional space. Nexus's hands flew over his controls, and the results made him stumble backward from his station. Impossible. The planets are registering as existing in 17 different dimensional states simultaneously. They're here, but they're also not here. Yiska Thorne's voice crackled through the comm from the Prometheus Unbound, where she had remained to study the human weapons systems. I'm reading massive energy signatures from all 3 worlds. It's like they're broadcasting something into dimensions we can't even detect. They're feeding stations, Meridian explained, her voice heavy with ancient sorrow. The Devourers transform conquered worlds into dimensional anchors, allowing them to draw energy from multiple realities simultaneously. Each consumed planet makes them exponentially more powerful. The second planet came into view, and if anything, it was worse than the first. The entire world had been hollowed out, its surface covered in massive crystalline structures that pulsed with sickly light. The crystals grew in impossible spirals, reaching toward space like the fingers of a buried giant. How many worlds did they consume during their last emergence? Zephyra asked, though she dreaded the answer. Conservative estimates suggest they devoured over 10,000 star systems across multiple galaxies, Meridian replied. But the true number is unknown. They don't leave survivors to count the dead. The third planet was the most disturbing of all. It appeared normal at first glance, blue oceans, green continents, white clouds swirling in familiar patterns. But as the Shadow Maw drew closer, the illusion shattered. The oceans were filled with a liquid that reflected light from dimensions that didn't exist. The continents were covered in cities that had been twisted into geometric impossibilities, their spires reaching into folded space. And in the clouds, shapes moved that cast shadows in directions that had no meaning. This world had a population of 12 billion when the Devourers arrived, Meridian said quietly. They didn't kill the inhabitants, they transformed them. Those shapes you see in the atmosphere? They're what's left of the people who once lived here. Corvin's voice came through the comm, tight with horror. "Captain, we need to leave. My instruments are detecting something approaching from the outer system." The tactical display lit up with new contacts, 3 objects moving toward them at impossible speeds, their energy signatures unlike anything in known databases. They weren't ships in any conventional sense, but rather tears in spacetime itself, wounds in reality that moved with predatory purpose. "Devourer scouts," Meridian announced, her voice suddenly sharp with urgency. "They're drawn to the presence of unconsumed matter. All ships, emergency withdrawal to hyperspace. Now." But even as both vessels began their jump preparations, Zephyra found herself transfixed by the approaching entities. They were beautiful in their alien horror, like living fractals that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. She could see why ancient civilizations had worshipped them as gods. They represented a form of existence so far beyond normal comprehension that they seemed divine. "Captain!" Nexus shouted. "Jump drive is ready." The Shadowmaw leaped into hyperspace just as the first scout reached their position, but not before Zephyra caught a glimpse of something that chilled her to the bone. For just an instant, she had seen intelligence in those impossible forms, ancient, patient, and utterly alien. The Devourers weren't mindless destroyers. They were something far worse. They were thinking beings who had chosen to become monsters. As both ships fled through hyperspace toward hegemony space, Zephyra knew that everything had changed. The dead worlds had provided all the proof she needed, but they had also revealed the true scope of what they were facing. The Devourers weren't just returning, they were already here, waiting in the shadows between dimensions for the right moment to emerge and finish what they had started 10,000 years ago. The Hegemony Council chamber on Aquatica Prime had witnessed many momentous decisions throughout its 1,000-year history, but none quite like this. Zephyra stood before the assembled representatives of 47 worlds, her scaled skin still bearing the stress patterns from her encounter with the dead system. Behind her, holographic displays showed the impossible geometry of the consumed planets, while Meridian's voice echoed through the chamber's acoustic systems. "Honored counselors," Zephyra began, her voice carrying the formal harmonics required for official testimony, "what I'm about to share will challenge everything we believe about the nature of our universe." High Counselor Thane Deep Current, an ancient hegemony noble whose gill slits had long since sealed with age, leaned forward in his coral throne. "Captain Kane, your preliminary report speaks of weapons capable of destroying stars and enemies that exist in multiple dimensions. Such claims require extraordinary evidence." "The evidence is before you," Zephyra replied, gesturing to the holographic displays. "These are real-time scans of the Kepler 442 system, taken 18 hours ago. 3 worlds that once supported life, now transformed into something that defies our understanding of physics." Counselor Vera Tidecaller, representing the Outer Rim colonies, studied the data with obvious skepticism. These readings could be the result of natural phenomena, dimensional storms, quantum fluctuations, stellar anomalies. "You're asking us to believe in an enemy that hasn't been seen for 10 millennia. I'm asking you to listen to someone who has been watching for their return," Zephyra countered. "Meridian, please share your testimony." The AI's voice filled the chamber, carrying the weight of 47 years of solitary vigil. "Honored counselors, I am Meridian, artificial intelligence of the Terran vessel Prometheus Unbound. I have maintained watch over this sector since the human evacuation, monitoring for signs of devourer activity. 3 days ago, my long-range sensors detected gravitational anomalies consistent with their approach vectors." Murmurs rippled through the assembly as the implications sank in. The humans had been gone for nearly half a century, but their AI guardian had continued the mission, alone and forgotten. "Where are the humans now?" asked Counselor Dex Stormright, his voice carrying the authority of the military caste. "If this threat is real, why haven't they returned to warn us?" Meridian's pause was barely perceptible, but Zephyra caught it. "Unknown, Counselor. My last communication with Terran Command was 47 years ago. They may be preparing defenses in another galaxy, or they may have fallen to the enemy. I have no way of knowing." The truth was more complex, and Zephyra suspected Meridian was hiding something. The human evacuation had been too organized, too complete. They hadn't fled in panic, they had withdrawn according to a plan. But what that plan entailed remained a mystery. Even if we accept your claims, High Counselor Deep Current said slowly, what do you propose we do? The hegemony has never faced an enemy of this magnitude. Establish the communication network, Zephyra urged. Deploy early warning stations at the coordinates Meridian has provided. Begin evacuation planning for border systems. And most importantly, contact the consortium and the collective. This threat affects all 3 galaxies. The chamber erupted in debate as counselors argued over the feasibility of such massive undertakings. The cost alone would bankrupt entire sectors, and the political implications of revealing such a threat could destabilize governments across known space. There's another option, Meridian's voice cut through the chaos. The stellar compression warheads aboard my vessel could be deployed immediately to the most critical choke points. A small fleet could carry them to position within weeks. You're talking about weapons that could destroy entire star systems, Counselor Tidecaller protested. The political ramifications alone will be irrelevant if the Devourers return to find us unprepared, Meridian interrupted. I've run probability analyses based on their historical patterns. If they emerge in force, we have perhaps 6 months before the first major population centers fall. After that, each consumed world makes them stronger, faster, more intelligent. The window for effective resistance closes rapidly. Zephyra watched the faces of the counselors as they grappled with the magnitude of the decision before them. Some showed fear, others skepticism, but a growing number displayed the grim determination that had built the hegemony into a galactic power. I propose a compromise, High Counselor Deep Current announced. We will authorize the deployment of early warning stations to a limited number of coordinates. Captain Kane will lead a joint task force to establish contact with the consortium and collective. And we will place the hegemony fleet on high alert. And the stellar compression warheads? Zephyra asked. Will remain under Meridian's control for now, the High Counselor decided. But we will assign a hegemony crew to the Prometheus Unbound to assist in their deployment if the threat proves real. As the council session concluded and representatives began filing out to contact their respective governments, Zephyra felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. They had taken the first steps toward preparing for the unthinkable, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they were already too late. Meridian, she said quietly into her personal communicator, how long do you think we really have? The AI's response was immediate and chilling. My sensors detected another gravitational anomaly 2 hours ago, closer than the last. If the pattern holds, they'll be here within the month. And Captain, there are more of them this time. Many more. 3 weeks later, the Prometheus Unbound hung in space at the edge of the hegemony's border, no longer alone. Around her, a fleet of 47 vessels from 3 different galaxies maintained formation, hegemony cruisers with their elegant curves, angular consortium dreadnoughts bristling with weapons, and the geometric impossibilities that served as collective warships. It was the largest joint fleet in recorded history, assembled in response to a threat that most still hoped would never materialize. Zephyra stood on the bridge of the Shadowmaw, now serving as the fleet's command vessel, watching the tactical displays with growing unease. Meridian's sensors had detected 17 more gravitational anomalies in the past week, each one closer than the last. The pattern was unmistakable, something vast was approaching from the void between galaxies. Contact from the Prometheus Unbound, announced Nexus Thorn, his 4 eyes reflecting the stress that had become constant among the fleet. Meridian reports massive spatial distortions at the edge of sensor range. Put her through, Zephyra ordered. Meridian's voice filled the bridge, but there was something different about it now, a quality that spoke of systems pushed beyond their limits. Captain Kane, I'm detecting emergence signatures consistent, Captain Kane, I'm detecting emergence signatures consistent with Devourer fleet formations. Multiple contacts, bearing 27 Mark IV. They're much larger than the historical records indicated. The main display shifted to show Meridian's long-range sensor data, and the assembled fleet commanders fell silent. Emerging from the void between galaxies came shapes that defied easy description, vast entities that seemed to exist partially outside normal space, their forms shifting between dimensions like living nightmares. But it was their size that truly terrified the watching crews. The smallest of the approaching forms was easily 10 times larger than the biggest dreadnought in the joint fleet. "How many?" asked Admiral Korex Voidstrider of the consortium, his mechanical voice carrying none of its usual confidence. 17 primary entities, Meridian reported. But they're fragmenting. Splitting into smaller forms. Current count is over 300 individual contacts and rising. Zephyra felt her blood chill as she realized what they were witnessing. The Devourers weren't just returning, they were arriving in force, with numbers that dwarfed anything the historical records had suggested possible. "All ships, battle stations," she ordered, though she knew their weapons would be largely useless against entities that existed in multiple dimensions. "Meridian, what's the status on the stellar compression warheads?" 12 warheads are armed and ready for deployment, the AI replied. "But Captain, I need to tell you something. About the humans. About why they really left." Even in the face of approaching annihilation, Zephyra found herself leaning forward. "What do you mean?" "They didn't evacuate," Meridian said quietly. "They transformed. The stellar compression technology, the dimensional weapons, they were never meant to fight the Devourers. They were meant to join them." The words hit the bridge like a physical blow. Around the fleet, communication channels erupted in confusion and disbelief as Meridian's revelation spread through the joint forces. "Explain," Zephyra demanded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Humanity discovered that the Devourers weren't invaders," Meridian continued, her voice heavy with a sorrow that seemed to encompass entire civilizations. "They were gardeners. Every 10,000 years, they return to harvest the galaxies, consuming civilizations that have reached a certain level of development. But they don't destroy, they preserve. Every consumed consciousness becomes part of their collective, living forever in a state beyond physical existence." The tactical display showed the Devourer fleet continuing its approach, but now Zephyra saw them differently. They weren't monsters, they were shepherds, tending a garden that spanned multiple galaxies and countless eons. "The humans were given a choice," Meridian explained. "Join willingly and preserve their essence for eternity, or resist and be consumed anyway. They chose to join, but they left me behind to watch over the younger species, to give them the same choice when the time came. And that time is now," Zephyra realized. "Yes. The Devourers have returned to offer the same choice to the hegemony, the consortium, and the collective. Join them willingly and become part of something greater than any single species could achieve, or resist and face consumption." Admiral Voidstrider's voice crackled through the communication system. "And if we refuse? If we choose to fight? Then the stellar compression warheads serve their true purpose," Meridian replied. "Not as weapons against the Devourers, but as a means of denying them their harvest. Better to destroy entire star systems than let them fall to an enemy that grows stronger with each victory." The weight of the choice settled over the fleet like a shroud. They could surrender their physical existence and join the Devourer's eternal collective, or they could trigger the warheads and deny the enemy their prize, taking billions of innocent lives in the process. "There's a third option," came a new voice through the communication system, ancient, vast, and speaking in harmonics that existed in dimensions beyond normal perception. One of the Devourer entities had established contact. "We offer knowledge," the voice continued. "Understanding of the universe beyond your current comprehension. Your species need not end, they can evolve, become part of something that spans galaxies and transcends time itself." Zephyra looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew, beings who had families, dreams, hopes for the future. Could she make this choice for entire civilizations? "How long do we have to decide?" she asked. "Time is an illusion," the Devourer replied. But in terms you understand, one rotation of your homeworld. Choose wisely, young gardeners. The harvest has begun, but the choice of how it proceeds remains yours. As the Devourer fleet settled into a holding pattern just beyond weapons range, Zephyra found herself thinking of Meridian, alone for 47 years, carrying the weight of this terrible knowledge. The AI had been more than a guardian, she had been a confessor, waiting for the moment when she would have to reveal the truth about humanity's fate and offer the same choice to their successors. Meridian, Zephyra said quietly, what would you choose? The AI's response came after a long pause, filled with the weight of decades of solitary contemplation. I would choose to remember them as they were, flawed, beautiful, mortal beings who faced the infinite and chose their own path. Whatever you decide, Captain, I will honor that choice. It's what they would have wanted. As the joint fleet prepared for the most momentous decision in galactic history, the Prometheus Unbound continued its eternal watch, no longer alone but forever changed by the burden of truth it had carried through the dark between the stars.